Good evening and welcome to ABN's Jihad Watch program. I'm Robert Spencer, and tonight we continue yet again with our series of interviews with noted freedom fighters. Tonight we have with us Mark Tapson, who is a Hollywood-based writer and screenwriter with some unique insights into what goes on in Hollywood. And tonight the theme for our show will be Islam Goes to Hollywood, specifically in connection with the 22nd Annual Media Awards Gala, which was held recently by the Muslim Public Affairs Council, or MPAC. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Robert.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Now, Mark, what I wanted to ask you is, you were actually at this awards ceremony of MPAC?
No, I did not attend this award show, which, as you noted, took place recently. It was just 2 or 3 weeks ago. I did not attend.
But you were able to get quite a bit of information about it. And I think we should start perhaps with some information about the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I can tell you that I wrote an article about the Muslim Public Affairs Council a few years back because they got quite a bit of media attention for a program condemning terrorism and supposedly teaching Muslims how to fight against terrorism. But when you read it, there was actually nothing in it that told Muslims how to cooperate with authorities or even that they should cooperate with authorities, but only that they should be careful to get a lawyer, to be extremely cautious in what they said to authorities. It was really a manual about how Muslims could not cooperate with counter-terror efforts, not, as it had been advertised, a Muslim counter-terror manual. And so this organization is actually operating a Hollywood bureau. Is that right?
Yes. I'll start with a little bit more background about the Muslim Public Affairs Council, or MPAC. They're quite similar to CARE, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, which most people are familiar with as promoting itself as a civil rights organization for American Muslims, and MPAC does pretty much the same thing. It describes itself as a public service agency working for the civil rights of American Muslims, and one of their primary goals is to promote an American Muslim identity, to promote in the media what they call an accurate portrayal of Islam and Muslims in popular culture and in the mass media, educating, or as they put it, educating the American public about Islam. So they're very media oriented in terms of how Muslims and Islam are portrayed in American culture. They've been around for 25 years. This is their 25th anniversary year. After 9/11, they created what they called the MPAC Hollywood Bureau. And you can go to the MPAC website and click on the link to their Hollywood Bureau and see what kinds of things they do there. The Hollywood Bureau, as its name would imply, specifically focuses on the portrayal of Islam and Muslims through Hollywood, through movies and television shows. As I said, they've been doing that since shortly after 9/11. It's a very busy bureau. It claims to serve as a professional resource to entertainment professionals by, again, providing what they call accurate information on Islam and Muslims to filmmakers, screenwriters, that sort of thing. The bureau has consulted with the producers of a lot of TV shows like 24, the terrorism drama, Bones, which is kind of an ongoing crime series, Seventh Heaven, the family show, which ended a few years ago, The Good Wife, which is a more current show, and Homeland, which a lot of people are very familiar with, the terrorism drama on Showtime, which is very possibly the top-rated drama in all of television. So the Hollywood Bureau it wields quite a bit of influence in Hollywood, where
Mark,
programs are concerned with
the Hollywood
Islamic
Bureau,
business.
would you say that their primary goal is to make sure that jihad terrorism is portrayed accurately, and that the motives and the goals of jihad terrorists are laid out fully in Hollywood movies so that Americans can resist them more in a more effective fashion? I mean, after all, this is supposedly a moderate Muslim group, right? Like CARE. So that's what they ought to be doing, right?
One would think so, wouldn't one? That's from the Hollywood films and TV shows that I've seen since 9/11. If that is indeed their intention, they're not doing a very good job of it. You've hit on a really fascinating aspect of this whole topic, which is how how Islamic terrorism is portrayed, and more importantly, the motivation for Islamic terrorism. I'm going to jump the gun here a little bit and make a big point, which I'll then have to enumerate a lot of examples about. But overall, the motivation for Islamic terrorism that you will see in films and television shows since 9/11, prior to 9/11 is a little bit different story. But since 9/11, the motivation is always portrayed in political terms. Always. Never is it portrayed in terms of, never is the motivation for Islamic terrorism ever depicted as being rooted in Islamic ideology itself. It's always phrased in terms of grievances against the West, political grievances. I'll give you just one example off the top of my head. There's a movie from, not very well-known movie from several years ago called Traitor, starring the fine actor Don Cheadle as a Muslim American who is working for the CIA. He's undercover in an Islamic terrorist cell, and he's trying to stop a devastating terrorist attack on American soil. Now, this filmmaker, I know that this filmmaker did consult with CARE and the Hollywood Bureau, and he went to great lengths to get a lot of things right, and that's evident in the movie. I have to tip my hat to him a little bit in terms of how he depicts certain aspects of Islamic culture. But there are scenes in it where, when it comes to the radicalization or the motivation for terrorism, you'll see, for example, the terrorist in the film radicalizing and indoctrinating some young Muslims, and he couches everything in terms of political outrage, everything in terms of grievances against the Western imperialists, against America and Israel, who are murdering Muslim children around the world and bombing Muslim countries. Everything is phrased in those terms, which gives the viewer the sense that maybe they've got a point. You know, maybe we're not so good. Maybe America's been bad, and as warped as these terrorists might be, maybe they've got a legitimate point. So that's really the message that comes across. Never in the film Traitor is Islamic ideology itself, or maybe more specifically the doctrine of jihad, never is that raised. That's never brought up. So it's not phrased in terms of religion so much as political grievances, and that's how and that's how they sort of encourage and radicalize the youth to sort of stand up and defend the Muslim Ummah. So that's just one example. There are many, many more.
Have you seen The Reluctant Fundamentalist?
I'll just give you one more. Not yet. That just came out. I'm eager. It either just came out or it's soon to come out here. I've forgotten, but I'm anxious to see it.
Well, I've read the book, and I can tell you it's the same thing.
Yes, I've been reading reviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
But you were going to give me another example, so please go ahead.
Yeah, well, another example, and this is maybe more prominent because it's such a popular show, Homeland. Homeland, in case people don't know, is about an American soldier who has been captured at war, and he's been missing for years, and when he's discovered and brought back to America, it turns out that he has been turned and is a sleeper agent for an Islamic terrorist named Abu Nazir. It's not quite clear throughout season 1, and I think we're only into or over with season 2 at this point. But it's not quite clear until the very end of season 1 whether or not the guy's actually been turned or not. But so it sucks you right along, and it's a very well done drama. I was quite into it until the very end of the season 1, where I could tell that the message of moral equivalence was just going to be too disgusting for me to continue. But the upshot of it is that Abu Nazir's motivation for sending this sleeper agent to America to commit an act of terrorism is that an American drone strike wiped out dozens of Muslim children in his country, including his own beloved son. So you don't see, and I have not seen season 2. I gave up on it shortly into season 2. So if they've corrected this, my apologies. But up through season 1 and a little bit beyond, the message was never about jihad. It was never about the religious roots of waging violent jihad. It was basically, or it was based in grievances against American violent politics. So very disappointing moral equivalency. The message in Hollywood, generally speaking, is always, always, always that America is no better. The CIA is just as bad as Al-Qaeda, that sort of a thing. With a couple of recent movies, you might begin to see a change there. I think there's some hope and change coming for Hollywood. Yes, it's just beginning, but I'm beginning to see. I've got one foot in Hollywood. I do some screenwriting on the side myself, so I have sort of one foot in this world with you, Robert, and the other foot in Hollywood. So I'm privy to some stuff that's going on and stuff that's kind of burgeoning in Hollywood. That's a whole other topic, but I think there's some hope and change down the line. But for the last 12 years since 9/11, the message from Hollywood has been one of unadulterated moral equivalency. Very disappointing. So the message that we're sending, not only to Americans who watch Hollywood product, but around the world, the message that we're sending to a very receptive audience around the world is that America is no better than the jihadists who are waging terrorism around the world, that we have no self-respect as a culture, that we're weak, that we have no moral confidence. These are the messages that Hollywood sends out to a very receptive audience around the world.
And so I know a lot of people might think, oh, it's just comfort Hollywood. To the jihadis.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people might say, look, this is just Hollywood. It's not important compared to, terrorism that's being waged around the world. It's just movies and TV shows. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that that not only domestically but internationally, Hollywood really is American culture. That's what the rest of the world sees and experiences. So the messages that Hollywood sends out shape not only the way Americans view their own country, but the way the rest of the world views us. Hollywood really serves as the barometer for America's moral and political character and direction. That's why it's important. And if it weren't important, the jihadists themselves wouldn't be so hell-bent on manipulating Hollywood's messages and creating messages of their own in this really burgeoning Arab cinema. Many millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars are now being funneled into a sort of burgeoning Arab film world, which is set to become like the next Bollywood, which is no small thing. If you have any idea of how internationally well-known Bollywood is, that's a serious step forward. The Arab world would really like to make itself the center of international cinema, and that's underway with Hollywood's complicity.
That's
both
really
financially
amazing.
And on a mentorship.
Why would Hollywood be complicit in such a thing?
Well, you have a way of hitting on very key, important points, Robert. You nail it right away. Hollywood is, it's a couple of things. It's partly the multicultural mindset that infests not only our culture at large, but is rampant in Hollywood. I'll give you a great example of that in a minute. The multicultural mindset sort of creates automatic complicity with the enemy. But it's in addition to the multicultural mindset, Hollywood now makes probably at least two-thirds of its revenue overseas. So Hollywood is becoming less interested in what a domestic audience cares about and more interested in what an international audience cares about. China's a big deal, for example. By 2020 or maybe 2025, China will be the world's biggest film audience. So Hollywood is very well aware of this kind of thing. But in terms of the Arab film world, there's, the Arab world has an awful lot of money, and they're funneling a lot of it into filmmaking, movie making. Hollywood wants to take part in that because there's a lot of money there. So there's a lot of mentorship going on also. There are Hollywood professionals, screenwriters and filmmakers who frequently travel to Dubai, for example, to lead workshops in screenwriting and filmmaking. The biggest film festival now probably in the world besides the Cannes Film Festival is in Dubai. So the Arab world is becoming kind of the center of international cinema gradually. And this is not to say that every movie that's going to come out of the Arab film world is going to be all about wiping Israel off the face of the map or killing great Satan America. Far from it. Probably a lot of these movies are going to be nothing more than money-making ventures, money-making entertainments. But the point I'm trying to make is that jihadists know full well the power of cinema and the power of culture. If it weren't important to them, they wouldn't have been working hard in Hollywood to manipulate it and to change those messages to read the way they want them to. And they wouldn't be working so hard to create a film industry of their own, to get their own messages out. I'll give you just one quick example. There's a Qatar-based film company that has partnered with a Lord of the Rings producer, the highly successful Lord of the Rings trilogy, film trilogy. They partnered with that producer to do a $100+ million biopic, which is a feature film biography of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. And I can guarantee you that project will be much more respectful to Muhammad than the 12-minute trailer, The Life of Muhammad, that was supposedly at the heart of the Benghazi scandal.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be, Mark, but it raises some very interesting questions, because if you're going to have believing Muslims make a biography of Muhammad, then you run into some problems. He can't be pictured, for one, and everything has to be done in that case from his point of view. There's a very funny novel by Richard Grenier, a comic writer who passed away a few years ago. And in the 80s, he wrote a book, I believe it's called the Marrakesh, I wish I could remember, Marrakesh 123 or something of this kind. In any case, in the novel, the main character and the narrator of the book is a screenwriter who is working on exactly this, a biography of Muhammad. And he wants to do a respectful job that will be like Jesus of Nazareth by Zeffirelli, only for Muslims. He's not a Muslim, but he thinks that it will be his blow for world peace. But he keeps running into these problems that come from Islamic belief, that he can't picture Muhammad, he can't have anybody even, and so they decide to have Muhammad be the camera view, and then they can't have anybody be taller than Muhammad. Muhammad has to be taller than all of them, so it has to be a camera view looking down on everyone's head. And it just gets progressively more absurd as they comply with these rules that have to do with complying with the hagiography surrounding Muhammad. And so I wonder if this is going to be a real project done by believers in Muhammad, then I think it might end up looking much the same way. There was that movie that Anthony Quinn made a few years back about Muhammad, and he got in all kinds of trouble about that because he showed Muhammad on the screen. And so even though it was an entirely respectful portrayal, it ended up getting widely criticized in the Islamic world.
That's a very valid point, and I don't know how the filmmakers are going to manage that, but I will say this, that the technical director on that film is Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi.
Oh,
I'm
no.
sure you're very familiar. Yes. Now, as you well know, and I'm sure your viewers also well know, Sheikh Qaradawi is, or at least is the former spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. He still wields an incredible amount of influence in the Islamic world. And he has made no bones in the past about things like supporting attacks on coalition soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, and supporting suicide bombings in Israel, supporting the execution of gays, that sort of thing. So he is very hardcore ideologically speaking. He is the technical director on the film. Now, when you have someone like that advising this film project, you can bet that it's going to be less of a project of peace and reconciliation, which is how the Lord of the Rings producer described this project, and more of a, how should we put it, a sort of an ideological Trojan horse. I don't know how they're going to manage the issue of depicting Muhammad. There was a film a few decades ago that attempted a sort of a first-person camera point of view from Muhammad. It was not very successful, but it sounds, I'm skeptical that they'll try to do that again. So I don't know how they're going to pull this off, but money has already been invested.
Well, maybe if they've got Qaradawi on board, maybe they can, he can issue a fatwa declaring that it's permissible for purposes of dawah to depict Muhammad in a film, and then they can go ahead.
That would not surprise me. But that's the sort of thing that we're looking at down the line. So it's our enemies take this very seriously. They take cinema very seriously, just as in the past, Hitler and the Nazis took film very seriously. Lenin said, not the songwriter Lenin, but the communist Russia's Lenin said, for us, cinema is the most important of all the arts. So now the jihadists have discovered that the cultural impact is far more important than we tend to give it credit for ourselves. So it's a big issue. I'll give you a quick example here of just how important it is to them. Shortly after Obama's reelection, sorry, not his reelection, his first election, a self-appointed delegation from Hollywood, from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, traveled to Iran as kind of a cultural exchange. It included, a couple of the organization's former presidents, the actress Annette Bening. They went to Iran to sort of smooth things over, smooth tensions between Iran and America. The cultural advisor there in Iran told them, we will believe Obama's policy of change when we see change in Hollywood. So if anybody's unclear about just how significant Hollywood is in the grand scheme of things, in terms of how the Islamic fundamentalists view this clash of civilizations, that statement really clarifies it, because what he's saying is, we'll believe that America, we will accept what America is doing politically when we see that Hollywood is doing what we want it to. So that's a significant statement.
But aren't they already? How they view it. I mean, I remember something going back even before 9/11 was the film of Tom Clancy's novel, The Sum of All Fears, and the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Hamas-linked Muslim Brotherhood front group that we've named a few times here already, they complained because the villains in the novel are Islamic jihadis. And, of course, there are Islamic jihadis all over the world, but CARE was enraged that they would actually be in a film because, as you say, they understand the power of cinema. And so they complained, and the producers immediately caved, and the film came out with the villains being neo-Nazis. And so I don't see how Hollywood is not doing their bidding already.
Hollywood, by and large, is doing their bidding. About that film, The Sum of All Fears, it actually came out in 2002, but you're right, it was filmed prior to 9/11. But it was filmed prior to 9/11, but it came out in 2002, featuring Ben Affleck, Morgan Freeman, and yes, they changed the bad guys to Hollywood's go-to bad guy, the neo-Nazis, as if they're an international threat. And They were successful, as you pointed out, with that film. They were less successful with a film from 1998 called The Siege. So this was quite a bit prior to 9/11. But even then, even as far back as 98 and a little bit before, Hollywood, I should say CARE, Impact and their Hollywood Bureau, or I should say the Hollywood Bureau didn't exist then, but CARE and another group called the Anti-Arab Discrimination Committee, if I'm getting that right, led by an academic named Jack Shaheen, they were trying very hard to wield influence in Hollywood. And they worked hard on this director of the film called The Siege, which starred Denzel Washington, Annette Bening, Bruce Willis. The Siege was about an act of Islamic terrorism in the streets of New York. And when CARE found this out, actually, I think Jack Shaheen went to them first and tried to convince them to change the bad guys to neo-Nazis or possibly to some kind of Timothy McVeigh-style domestic terrorist. And the director said, well, I appreciate your concerns about discrimination, but that's not really the story we're telling here. And so that ended that conversation. But then CARE came around and began pressuring the director further and saying, okay, if you're going to have Islamic terrorists in the film, we want to just make sure that your depiction of Islam, your depiction of Muslims is correct and balanced. So they put a lot of pressure on the director, who did ultimately he ultimately agreed rather to add a Muslim character, a sympathetic Muslim character. He was one of the detectives, played by Tony Shalhoub, who has since gone on to be famous for his show Monk. And Shalhoub plays a very sympathetic American law enforcement official whose son gets swept up in a Muslim internment camp thrown together by the rabidly Islamophobic military commander Bruce Willis. And this storyline was added due to CARE's influence. So the director felt like, okay, we'll give some balance to this. We'll have Muslim terrorists, but we'll also show the American government throwing together an internment camp and pitching Muslims into it, including the son of Tony Shalhoub's character. So this whole sub-story really sort of undercuts the message of who the bad guys are. So that film was in 1998. And shortly thereafter, in fact, just prior to the 9/11 attacks, CARE's executive director, Nihad Awad, was saying things in public like, Hollywood has not been our friend, meaning a friend to American Muslims. Hollywood has not been our friend. Hollywood has portrayed freedom fighters as terrorists. Hollywood has done the job that Zionists cannot do, or have not done, as he put it. So he was kind of railing against Hollywood in public even then. And just to get back to The Siege for a moment, that balanced depiction, by the way, was not enough for CARE, who protested the film. And in fact, balance really isn't the objective here. I mean, let's be honest. When these people like Jack Shaheen, who has made an academic career out of dissecting Hollywood's purported discrimination against Arabs and Muslims, and CARE, when groups like that, or Impact's Hollywood Bureau, when they claim to be seeking balance, what they're really looking for is to ensure that no Muslims or Arabs are depicted as terrorists. They want to make, that's what they want, which is ridiculous because it's a reality. It is the most prominent, inescapable reality.
Absolutely. Mark, we're going to have to take a break at this point for a minute or so.
Sure.
This is ABN's Jihad Watch program. We're here with Mark Tapson, and I'm Robert Spencer. We're discussing Islam and Hollywood, and we'll be back with much more right after this.
The word gospel translates to news that brings joy. But this isn't just any news. A gospel is news that changes a life forever. After being invaded and enslaved by Persia, Greece won 2 decisive battles at Marathon and Solnus. The Greeks sent out heralds, also called evangelists, to proclaim the good news to the cities. We have fought for you. We have won. And now you're no longer slaves. You're free. The reality is that we are all slaves, slaves to sin and slaves to death. We are slaves in need of good news. Enter Jesus, God's Son, fully God, fully man, bringing news that would change our lives forever. His news was this: I am the divine, come to you to do what you could not do for yourself. I will take what you deserve so you can have what I deserve. You have no idea how much it will cost me, but you also cannot imagine the depths of my love for you. It is a gift that I give freely. So repent. Repent from all the ways you've run from me and follow me. Follow me because I am the only way to eternal life. Follow me because I'm the Savior you've been looking for. Follow me because I have authority over everything, yet I have humbled myself for you. Follow me because I died on a cross for you, because I'm your true love and your true life. This is my good news for you. This is my gospel, that you have been saved by grace and that you are slaves no more.
Good evening and welcome back to ABN's Jihad Watch program. We're discussing Islam and Hollywood with Mark Tapson, and I'm Robert Spencer. Mark, I got to ask you at the beginning of the second half here, we've been talking about Hollywood producers being anxious to whitewash the connection between Islam and terrorism, to not depict Muslims as terrorists at all, or if they ever do, to have no mention whatsoever of any Islamic motivation, but to always portray them as being reacting to the atrocities allegedly committed by America or Israel or what have you. But the view that these same Islamic supremacist organizations that have pressed for these concessions, like Hamas-linked CARE, like MPAC and the others, their view is that it's just the opposite, that Hollywood is full of negative portrayals of Muslims and Arabs. There's even a book, Real Bad Arabs, which is very popular among Muslims. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a book or a film, to tell you the truth. You may know. But in any case, whatever it is the basis for numerous presentations that I see being put on by local Muslim Students Association chapters and other Muslim groups around the country. And they really do work energetically to propagate the idea among Muslims and among the mainstream media that Muslims are unfairly portrayed constantly as terrorists in the mainstream media. Now, what on earth is their basis for saying that?
There's been very little, if any, basis since 9/11. We talked about a couple of examples prior to 9/11 where these groups were already pressing Hollywood to give a quote-unquote balanced depiction. That book, Real Bad Arabs, by the way, was written by Jack Shaheen, the fellow that I mentioned earlier. I think it also has been made into a documentary or a film of some sort, maybe an instructional film but it was a book by Jack Shaheen. And yeah, the suggestion, the assumption, maybe I should say, in our culture today is that, contrary to the evidence, is that our culture is just inherently discriminatory against Arabs and Muslims, and that Hollywood is constantly depicting them badly, depicting them as terrorists and ragheads and things like this. I mean, but they never point to examples. You can't really point to any examples since 9/11 that, or even if you can find what seem to be examples, they're always offset by a quote-unquote good Muslim or a balanced character, a good Muslim. But this is just the assumption in our culture today, is that, oh, we've got to stop stereotyping Muslims. It's just like the assumption that anytime there's a terrorist attack carried out by a Muslim, that there's going to be some kind of backlash on the part of rabidly Islamophobic and racist Americans. That backlash never appears. So, but the assumption is that Americans are just always poised to take out their racist hatred or Islamophobic hatred against Muslims, and that we're constantly depicting them badly. There's very little evidence for that in Hollywood since 9/11. When Hollywood has bent over backwards, just as our popular culture has, just as our presidents have, to depict Islam as peaceful and to detach acts of Islamic terror from the responsibility of Islam itself. That's been the predominant that's been the predominant thing in our culture. But the assumption is there because they work it so hard, because these other groups benefit from working that so hard, that working on convincing us that our discrimination is never ending.
So you're saying that these Muslim groups that decry the allegedly negative portrayals of Muslims in film actually benefit from giving people the impression that Muslims are negatively portrayed in film. Can you
absolutely,
spell that, break that down for us? Spell that out, please, sir. This is a very important point.
Well, they absolutely benefit from it. I mean, because they've worked so hard for decades now. And by they, I mean what we could call Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups in the United States, spin-offs like CARE or Impact, lesser-known Muslim groups like ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. Those groups, what we call Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups, those groups have worked very hard for decades to depict Muslim Americans in the same light as they've modeled their actions here on other civil rights groups, like in the past, civil rights groups for blacks. And so they've modeled that. In fact, the word Islamophobia, as you well know, the word Islamophobia is a neologism created by the Muslim Brotherhood itself, because they know how effective a phrase like that or a term like that is. They saw how effective the term homophobia was for the rights of gays, and they modeled that term Islamophobia after that civil rights success, after that linguistic strategy. And so it's very much to their benefit to create the impression in popular culture that Muslim Americans are an oppressed group that has been denied its civil rights and continues to be denied its civil rights, and continues to be maligned in the media and through Hollywood. And so they've worked that very hard and very successfully.
So you're saying that victimhood is a business? That victimhood plays to the advantage of the group posing as the victim? Why, this is appalling. I don't think people know this. And I know I'm being facetious here, but this is a point that is very much worth emphasizing, that nowadays it is a easy path to special privileges and to a wink and a nod in place of genuine scrutiny to be cast as a victim. And so Muslim groups in the United States energetically pursue victim status so as to, in the first place, gain special privileges, and to, in the second place, deflect attention away from the reality of jihad terror and Islamic supremacism. And one of the chief ways they do this is by pretending that they are routinely portrayed unfairly in Hollywood, when actually the unfairness is that Hollywood virtually never, essentially never, contains any accurate portrayals in any of its films of the reality of Islamic jihad.
Yeah, if anything, as I've said before, Hollywood bends over backwards to do just the opposite. I'll give you an example. You know, we were talking about Impact at the beginning of this show, the Impact Awards show that their Hollywood Bureau puts on to celebrate filmmakers and producers that they feel produced works that were very complimentary or pro-Muslim. One of the awards shows from a few years ago, 2009, I think, gave an award to the producers of the animated comedy The Simpsons for an episode that they did in which Homer Simpson and his son Bart falsely accused, or just Homer actually, falsely accused some Muslim neighbors of being involved in an act of terrorism. So this is the kind of thing that seeps into American culture and into the very sensitive American mindset. We're very sensitive to the rights of everyone and to being fair to everyone. And that sort of message that we shouldn't view Muslims as potential terrorists, that message really seeps in. And this is not to say that we should view all Muslims as terrorists. That's not the point. The point is that terrorism, Muslim terrorists do exist, and that Hollywood never really portrays them correctly, never lays the blame for their act of terrorism on jihad itself. They always manage to subvert the message by pointing the evil back at us, pointing out the legitimacy of Islamic grievances against Western culture, specifically America. So that message is always subverted by it.
Why has Hollywood gotten to be so suicidal? Why do they always side with the enemies of the United States? It wasn't like that in the 40s. In the 40s, you had, in World War II, you had some of the greatest directors in Hollywood spending considerable amounts of time making movies supporting the war effort. Even a movie like Casablanca, I don't think a lot of people realize, it wasn't a propaganda film or a film made to boost troop morale or something of that kind, but it contains a very strong message exhorting Americans to support the war effort. And so I don't understand why it's so different nowadays. Is there any way you can elucidate that at all?
Somewhat. You know, I could, it's partly the multiculturalism. Let me just put it this way. The 70s happened. In the 60s and 70s, a new generation of Hollywood filmmakers came along. Really in the 70s, Hollywood filmmakers came along who'd been highly influenced by the 60s and the changing mindset that took place in those decades. Hollywood's not what it once was. It's not fashionable anymore and hasn't been for a long time to portray America as in a positive light, in a moral light. It's very unfashionable. It happens occasionally, but then filmmakers take heat for it. And I'll give you a quick example. This has nothing to do with Islam, but the movie Red Dawn, the remake of the 1980s movie Red Dawn that came out a year or so ago, was excoriated by critics who were largely left-leaning, as Hollywood itself is, excoriated by critics for what they called its jingoistic attitude about America, which is laughable if you watch the movie. The movie Red Dawn is about a North Korean invasion, or at least this most recent remake is about an invasion of North Koreans in America and a team of American teenagers who basically become a guerrilla group and try to take their country back. And there's no patriotism exhibited throughout the film except in the very final frame where you see an American flag waving. But that American flag in that single frame was enough to get the critics in an uproar about its supposed jingoism. So it's very unfashionable to be patriotic about America, to have any kind of a black and white stance about good and evil. Very unfashionable. So it's partly the multiculturalism that seeped into our consciousness, where we view every culture as being equally valid except for Western civilization, which is the fount of all evil. And that creates, for one thing, a mindset of self-censorship in Hollywood. So groups like CARE don't really have to work that hard, because there's a lot of self-censorship that goes on in Hollywood.
So here yet again
I'll give you a quick example.
The bitter fruits of the leftist Islamic supremacist alliance that we see operating so many different fields. But multiculturalism, yes, which is an invention of the left, of course, seems to play right into the hands of these Islamic supremacist Hamas-linked advocacy groups to create an atmosphere where we're churning out movie after movie that essentially renders Americans complacent about the nature and magnitude of the threat. Now, of course, you could say it's not the movie's place to educate Americans about the nature and magnitude of the threat, but that really is the role that films played to a tremendous degree during World War II.
And it's a role that Hollywood continues to play today. I mean, the left knows full well, and as pointed out, the alliance between the left and the jihadists is very beneficial to both. David Horowitz calls it the unholy alliance, and so the messages that Hollywood puts out reflect that unholy alliance. I'll give you an example, a quick example of Hollywood's self-censorship. I have a friend who, up until recently, was on the staff of the E! Network's True Hollywood Story, a TV show. And one day the staff was sitting around brainstorming about topics for future episodes. And so my friend, who happens to be very well educated about the Islamic threat, my friend ingeniously brought up honor killings. Said, let's do an episode on honor killings, because this was in the wake of a couple of very high-profile instances of honor killings that had taken place not just in distant, backwards lands, but in America. And so this might have made a very interesting topic for them to focus on. The response around the table was this, in verbatim: I don't know, that religion's taken quite a beating lately. So the reaction was Islam's really been taking it on the chin a lot lately. We should lay off. There was no discussion around the table about the fact that the people who have really taken quite a beating lately are the victims of honor killings. That doesn't matter in Hollywood. What matters is we need to lay off Islam. Now imagine if my friend had suggested that they do an episode on Israeli war crimes or Christians who bomb abortion clinics. Do you think that the reaction around the table would have been, gee, I don't know, Christianity and Judaism, they've taken quite a beating lately. Let's lay off. So that would never happen.
Never.
So that's the self-censorship. Yeah, that's the self-censorship that goes on in Hollywood. It's knee-jerk. It's not even rationally thought through, and it's pervasive.
And this shows the skillfulness of the Islamic supremacist advocacy groups when they portray any honest discussion of Islam and jihad as hatred or bigotry or racism, because, of course, Hollywood multiculturalists want to avoid those things above all. And so if they hear that something is hatred, bigotry, or racism, whether it actually is or not, they'll run the other way. Am I right?
Sure.
And so then...
absolutely. And that's the success...
I'm sorry?
Well, that's the successful strategy. Sorry to interrupt, but that's the successful strategy behind... That's the successful strategy behind the phrase hate speech. Mm-hmm. Once you once you successfully inculcate people with this notion that certain speech is hate speech, then you can just charge anything that you disagree with as being hate speech. And you don't have to discuss it on the merits. You don't have to debate something on its own merits. You don't have to rationally discuss something. You can just dismiss it as hate. And that's been a very successful linguistic tool for the left and for their brethren, the jihadists.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak as embodying in my own person no less than 3 hate groups. I can tell you that this is a tactic that has been used often on me, and it is exactly that. It's a substitute for engagement and a substitute for thought. There are many Muslims who have said, well, I don't need to debate him. The Southern Poverty Law Center says he's a hate group. Well, nobody ever asks what qualifies the Southern Poverty Law Center to determine whether someone's group is a hate group or not, and who judges the judge, you know? But these questions don't come up. It's just used as a convenient excuse. And it shows, indeed, the effectiveness of the tactic. Now, Mark, we have only 7 or 8 minutes left, and so I thought that we could return here toward the end to this Muslim Public Affairs Council Gala, just because I wanted to ask you. It was the 22nd Annual Media Awards Gala. Now, given what we know about MPAC, as you outlined earlier, and what we know about Muslims in Hollywood, as we've been discussing all this time, what are the kind of people who get awards? What kind of things do get awarded among the offerings from Hollywood in a given year by a group like the Muslim Public Affairs Council?
That is a good question, as all your questions are. I will list a few of the winners from the past, at least the more prominent ones that people would be very familiar with. For 21 years now, MPAC has honored what they call the voices of courage and conscience, people who use art and media to create what they deem to be accurate portrayals of Islam and Muslims, and also deal with important social and cultural issues. And some of the winners of these awards, some of these voices of courage and conscience, have included people like the documentary filmmaker Michael Moore, whom we're all familiar with. He won for Bowling for Columbine. Spike Lee won for Malcolm X, Spike Lee, the director. Malcolm X featuring Denzel Washington. The producer of Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth won an award. George Clooney's production company won for the very morally inverted film from 2005 called Syriana, which was specifically about America creating terrorists through its greediness for oil. Actor Alan Baldwin has won for, I think, sort of generally what they deem to be his commitment to social justice and civil liberties. So those are the kinds of names that most Americans would be familiar with. There are other lesser known names, producers of the TV show Bones, for example, because they have a positive Muslim character in it, a recurring character. The producers of The Simpsons for the episode I mentioned previously, in which was basically about the supposed disease of Islamophobia. So those are the kinds of people who get awards at the MPAC Media Awards galas.
So here again we see the close alliance between leftist, not only politicians, but here in this case, leftist formers of opinion and cultural icons, people like Michael Moore. And it raises yet again the strange question. People have often noted to me that, well, look, the first people who would be stoned to death or beheaded or whatever, if Islam were actually to come to power in the U.S., would be these leftists who commit any number of actions that Islamic supremacists would consider to be moral crimes. And so how is it that they can ally? And I wonder if you have any insight into that.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think the left ultimately, I think the left doesn't really, they don't really perceive it that way. They of course don't really believe that after this unholy alliance has succeeded and taken over, they don't really believe that there's going to be a point where Muslims will turn on them and wipe them out. They don't. They turn a blind eye to that. But I think deep in the heart of the radical left is a desire to be enslaved and a desire to submit. And Islam, as we know, does not mean peace, it means submission. And I think deep in the heart of the radical left, they have already submitted,
well, now that's
consciously
a very
or
interesting
not.
insight. I've always often pointed out that, or suggested, I should say, that they have a shared authoritarian impulse, that both clearly are not friends of the freedom of speech, both clearly want to shut down and discredit their opponents rather than engage on the level of ideas. Both have a contempt for free exchange of ideas. That's clear. It didn't occur to me that the left might actually like the idea of the boot on its own face and not just want to apply it to someone else's. To take, I believe it was Orwell's phrase, summing up totalitarianism.
Your point is absolutely right. I mean, the totalitarian impulse is shared. And also, the radical left, they live in a fantasy world. I'll give you, this is a non-Islamic example, but, one time the guitarist Carlos Santana was asked by a reporter about the Che t-shirt he was wearing, the Che Guevara t-shirt. And he said, didn't you know that Che hated artists and he would have slaughtered your kind and he was a killer? And so he went through the whole litany of Che's moral depredations and murders. And supposedly Santana replied with, "You're just getting hung up on the facts, man." So the left lives in a kind of fantasy world in which these ideals that the facts don't support are predominate. So it's a combination of things. It's the fantasy world, it's the totalitarian impulse. It's this kind of what I think is sort of a suicidal impulse to submit to a totalitarian force. It's a combination of those things.
Well, that's really, I love that. You're just getting hung up on the facts, man. Mark Tapson, this has been a very interesting hour. Huh?
Doesn't that really sum it up about?
I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a lag, and so when you talk and I'm talking, I can't hear you, and I stop, and then there's too much of a lag, and I don't hear you again. So anyway, we have gotten through the hour nonetheless with it, and I appreciate your insights very much, and I thank you, Mark Tapson, for getting hung up on the facts. This has been very interesting. Mark Tapson is a Hollywood screenwriter and writer, and he has given us very important insights and revelations concerning the Islamic activities in Hollywood and how Islamic supremacist groups have tried to manipulate have successfully manipulated the portrayal of Muslims in Hollywood film, which is all important for shaping American attitudes. And I thank you very much for spending this time with us. This has been ABN's Jihad Watch program. I am Robert Spencer. Thanks for watching, and good night.